Hello, everyone. I hope this finds each one of you well. Welcome to Career Education. We have a split class this semester, so there will be quite a few education majors and quite a few psychology majors. There is something we need to get out of the way just right now, right off the bat. Please check on self-service and make sure that you are in either of the two sections. So if you are going for counselor licensure, you plan to be an LPC, and everybody in the town of Enid decided to drive past just then. If you're trying to be an LPC or an LADC, you have to take this course for 3 credits. The number that you'll be looking for on your actual self-service will be 5833. You'll need to look in self-service to make sure that you're in the right course. Now, if you're an education major and you're not wanting to pay the full price for an extra hour of a class that you're not going to need because you're not going to be licensed in the state of Oklahoma, if you're just getting your master's of education, not just, it's a task in itself. If you're getting your master's of education and you're not going to be licensed as a counselor, then you're going for your school, counselor licensure or certification. If you're school counseling, you just need it for 2 credits. That's the first thing we need to get out of the way, because if you don't fix it now, you're going to be stuck, and probably stuck in a situation you don't want to be in. We can't go back at the registrar later after, 3 weeks in, or even after the class is over, and say, oh, by the way, they needed it for 3 credits. We just can't do it. The regents, the state does not allow that because it looks like academic fraud. So we cannot, it has to be rectified, remedied right now. That has bit 2 students in the past. So please be sure you're enrolled in the right module. That said, if you don't know me, sorry, I had to get that out of the way. If you don't know me, my name is Taylor Randolph, and I am the Master of Counseling. I'm the Master of Counseling Psychology Program Coordinator. That's my official title. And I'm happy to be your teacher this semester. I like career education. I've never taught it. I just took it last year as a PhD student, so a lot of the concepts are still pretty fresh. It's not something that a lot of people use, unless you particularly are a high school guidance counselor, or maybe you're, a guidance counselor in middle school, or maybe even in higher ed. Maybe you get hired on to be, to help people with career determination. Or I guess you go to vocational rehab too, work there and help people try to find, careers that match. But it's, out of all of the subjects, usually this one, for whatever reason, is students are probably less passionate about it because it's just not something they're going to do. To be honest with you, I haven't used a lot of career guidance in a while. I used to work with adolescents, so I did try to help them find, educational career trajectories that were going to suit them, because that's what career guidance is. You want to set somebody up where they're happy with their work. And so it's an important, very important subject. In fact, the American Counseling Association began as a group of guidance counselors out of the 1950s on into the 80s. It took until the 90s until the American Counseling Association really formally, completely kind of split from, the Association of Guidance Counselors, because that's who counselors were, the counseling profession. You're like, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that either until last year when I took this career guidance class as a PhD student. So it surprised me. Really in the 80s is when it really began to, their counseling began to have its own niche outside of just helping somebody find a career. Just crazy to think, right? So anyway, counseling owes a lot to guidance, and I think that's why there's this big primacy still to keep this as one of the KCREP core subjects. This is one of the core subjects that will be on the National Counselor exam. So you'll need this information. I mean, it's on there. I mean, out of the 200 questions, there are 20 some odd questions, maybe more, that deal with career guidance. So, and this is typically I will tell you, this is typically an area where students score poorly just because they don't, they don't employ it a lot. And also they don't put a lot of their passion into it because it may not be something that they're going to do. And so what I would encourage you to do right now, all students, more so with the MCP students, be sure that you save the information from this class, because you will be tested on this information come comprehensive examination time at the end of your program. There'll be a section on our test because we're trying to prep you for the big test. So you'll want to save, and I'll try to highlight the big theorists and the big concepts that you'll need to know in this structure and the parameters of the course. So that said, finding one's vocation, when we think of the word vocation, we think of like Autry Tech or, vocational education, where we're going to learn to weld, or we're going to learn to, do something, like that. Maybe be an automotive mechanic. We're going to get a vocation. That's not really the root of the word. Vocation isn't just some, because when I think, unless somebody's like my father actually loved working on cars. So you might say that was one of his vocations, was that he was called to work on cars. Our vocation, so the vocalization, vocaling, vocal to make sound. So some of us are called into become counselors. Like we have this feeling inside of us, I'm called to go and do this. So when we talk about vocational counseling and career counseling, it's really like our calling, our life's calling. It's hard really to underestimate that, because what's the first thing that people ask you when they meet you? Like, hi, I'm so-and-so, what's your name? What do you do? And so our vocate, what do we do? It's almost like it becomes a big part of our identity. And so being able to match this, being able to match your calling to your identity, and a lot of times when we go through and we try things, our jobs might change us. I know that's happened for me. My jobs over time have changed who I am and who my identity is. And we adopt a lot of the identity from our jobs. So it almost in a way determines a lot of our personalities and can influence our personalities. So really this is, you may think, well, this is just kind of a required class, I got to take it. But really this means a lot. This content and matching someone to something that they're passionate about means a lot. I will put this caveat out there now, unless I forget about it later, that we live in a world that's changing very quickly. I remember when I took a career guidance exam, this assessment in college, I was struggling with what's my major. And it told me some things: you're good in English, you're good in science. And so I was like, English and science, let's match those things together and do psychology. I didn't really know that I wanted to help people. That wasn't part of my identity back then as as 18, 19-year-old. I didn't really care. I was pretty egocentric, like most 18, 19-year-olds are. You just don't know much about the world. So they said, prepare to change vocations about 7 times. I think I've changed about 4 times. So I've got 3 more to go. Major changes. Of course, I've changed jobs along the way more times than that. But anyway, it's important to find something that meshes with who we are internally, because if we don't, we're miserable, right? Anybody work a job that you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this. This is just not me. And whether it's the environment, whether it's the actual task of the job. So all these kind of ideas that I'm throwing around here, like personality, like traits, or internal morals, like your identity, your skills, your passions, all these things come into play with trying to guide people into something that's going to fulfill them, give them, actually each day gonna fill them up where I have life. This is giving me life. I can keep on living. I can do some good in the world. And so ideally that's what happens. And so really it's hard to underestimate, again, the importance of finding a good career. I will say this, our economy and the things that have happened, you know, in the past, not just the past few months, but even 2008 and the crash there, and you know, a lot of career opportunities are becoming harder and harder to come by for the whole spectrum of our population. You know, we're seeing grants, you know, harder to come by. We're seeing tuition increases because of, and I'll be very explicit, because of a lack of public support for education. There is no two ways about it. If you look at Northwestern, for example, 20 years ago, 66% of, and this is back when I started at Northwestern '99. When I attended school here, most of my tuition was actually paid for by the state, because the state put more money into higher education. It's gone from roughly 66% of all of the, you know, the structure and payment and fees that make Northwestern run, down to about 30%. And so where do you think, when the state, well, it cut higher ed, in the past 6-7 years, the state's cut literally 25-30% out of higher education in Oklahoma. You know, there's this big, and you could make an argument for, you know, elementary education, if they funded a pay raise, and I don't know if they're going to be able to have the money to pay for it, but you know, we don't necessarily value education. It's not just here. It's really stark in reality here, because the money that used to be available from public funds is not there. And so where is it made up? It's made up for in tuition. That's very clear in other states as well, that's happened. So I will say that in career guidance, it is now harder, I believe, to give someone an honest appraisal of what is out there on the horizon, not only because of the education and the, you know, the ladders that were basically pulled up, said, those people don't need those ladders to, you know, economic equality and independence now. Those have been pulled up and pulled away. But also, you know, there are a lot of just service jobs out there. And I think in what we're going through now as a country with a pandemic, there's a lot of people in service industries that are hurting. And so that's a conversation for another day, but I do want to put that out there now. Let me pause this here and create 2 videos so this doesn't get too long-winded. Let's go into the syllabus in our next video.